Simple enough in this section, subtopic C, we want to talk about the covenant with Abraham and how we can see not just Christ, but also that preparation for and the moving towards, right, the church itself as well. The basic questions for this section: what is the covenant with Abraham? Number one, how's Isaac a type of Christ? Number two, and overall on all that is, what about the church? Right? All right. So first, we know the story, so this is just quick recap. Right? God calls Abram, his original name, right? And Abram wasn't just a solitary individual, but he had a whole tribe, right? He's the leader of a tribe. So we go from Adam and his wife, right, a marriage covenant, to Noah and a family. Now we move down to Abram and his tribe of possibly 3,000 people. Abram's problem, right, when he encounters God is that he's an old man. He never had any children, so he has no one to pass on inheritance to, right? That's a big problem in the olden days, right? So Abraham, father in faith, is what he's called. He responds to God's promises. God promises stuff to Abraham, right? You're going to have a multitude. You're going to have as countless as the stars in the sky and the sands in the seashore, right? Abraham believed God's promises, and so despite the fact that he had never been able to conceive a child, he believes it. He follows God. He says, all right, I'll go to where you call me to. Leaves his homeland with his entire household, right? Now, 25 years after this event, God makes the promises again in great detail. Says, Abram, I'm going to promise you and your wife are going to have a son. You're going to bring a name him Isaac. Right? And God makes this everlasting covenant with Abraham, right? A covenant, right? Continual. Through Isaac, Abraham would be the father of this multitude of nations and produce kings, right? Particular sign of the covenant for Abraham to show his obedience, right, to God, that God's going to be for him and he's going to be for God, circumcision, right? That's a big time sign, especially if you're an adult, to do such a thing, right? You're really saying, I'm serious about this, right? The other covenant that the people of God would be faithful to, right, going back into, right, his ancestry, right, is that promise of the Sabbath, right, and the covenant of the Sabbath. Right? Abraham was obedient. Right? God promised to them, it seemed impossible because they were near 100 years old. Right? How in the world is she going to conceive? But she does, right? And then God tests Abraham's obedience after Isaac had been born and become a young man. How? Because he tells Abraham, go sacrifice your son. Remember that? Kill him. Burn the body. Right? Just like all the nations around you, give the human sacrifice, your firstborn son, to the gods. Right? That was the way they did it all around Abraham. The big question is God going to be like everybody else, or are they going to be different, right? Set apart, right? What does God want? And Abraham responds not by saying, no way, you're not that type of God, or no way, I'm not going to do that, no way, you gave me this child, this is your plan, I'm going to follow it, right? But he says, all right, God, right? He responds by going out, obeying God, right? And we know also that Isaac trusts him, because Isaac's not just a little child, he's a young man, right? He carries the wood of the sacrifice on his cross. Whereas his father was old. Isaac could have resisted. Isaac knows that they're going up there, right? He knows they're going to offer sacrifice, and he knows they don't have an animal to sacrifice, right? So there we go, and he lets his father bind him. His dad's an old man. He's a young, youthful man, right? He can probably resist dad. But no, and Abraham makes this statement, right, to Isaac, God will provide the sacrifice. He will provide the lamb. And it comes true, right, that at the moment that he's going to sacrifice Isaac, God says your faith, right, is saved. It shows your obedience, and he offers the ram. And so here we go. Christians understand the sacrifice as a prefigurement, a type, a foreshadowing of the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Right, the location of the sacrifice relates to the crucifixion of Christ all the way, that God will provide the lamb. Here we even go down to Mount Moriah, where Abraham makes the sacrifice, is where Jerusalem ends up being the place of Christ's crucifixion. Right, God's promise to Abraham, right, is also a promise that all nations, the whole world, will be blessed through him. So it's partially realized by the people of Israel. They're called by God to be the light of nations, completely fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. And not only the person of Jesus Christ, but we also see all the nations of the world be blessed through him. Where do we see that? From Jesus Christ, right? That is the church, right? Through the church, all people can encounter Christ. Right? The relationship between Adam and Eve and Abraham, is that Abraham's obedience finally begins to reverse the disobedience of Adam and Eve. Remember, God makes that promise to Noah that now we have the new covenants that are going to turn, right, people around in their sinfulness towards God. And here it is. We start seeing it. Abraham's the father of faith because he had great faith in God's promise to him. All right, key ideas for this then. God made a covenant with Abraham that he would make him the father of a nation. Right? In this, we see this trust in possible promises, but Abraham becomes the father of all who have faith. Abraham's son Isaac is a type prefigurement of Christ. right? And that through Abraham, it's not just about the one person of Abraham, but it's about his whole family and the whole multitude of all nations, right? So we have Christ, right, connecting to Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac, right? Jesus Christ. We also see Jesus Christ in all nations fulfillment, that all nations encountering Christ, right, is not just the person of Christ, but it is, right, our understanding of what the church is to be, right? Foreshadowing of what the church is to be. And that's what we're seeing in the Old Testament. All this pointing towards what the church is to be. So again, let's recap, right? With Adam, church is to be that communion of believers. With Noah, it's to be that connection with God and that family. And it's to be what? Like the ark, that place that protects from harm, outside world, danger, right? So all these things that we're pointing to so far about what the church is to be, and its connection with the Savior, Jesus Christ.